it's not impossible. It's a very steep hill to climb, but it's not impossible. And if she does do well and she wins New Hampshire and South Carolina, as you mentioned, then of course those would be two huge wins for her.
Just days to go until the Iowa caucus, Trump's two main rivals for the Republican nomination have been taking part in a TV town hall debate overnight. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley are both well behind Trump in the polls. So, did anything happen that could change that? Amy Tarkanian is a Republican strategist and former chair of the Nevada Republican Party. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning.
Any major highlights from the town hall debate?
Well, you are actually a little bit ahead of us time-wise, and so we have yet to actually watch it. So we've been watching the separate town halls that have been held so far, but they are going to have a debate tomorrow night, Las Vegas time. And so they have had their separate town halls. And it seems that right now you have the majority of voters who are either not paying attention at all, or they've already pretty much made up their minds. And so if you're looking at some of the polling right now, you mentioned Iowa. Iowa is the first state to actually have their election. They hold the caucus. But then you look at another state like New Hampshire, which is actually more of a moderate voting base. Nikki Haley is actually now within single digit of striking distance of Donald Trump. And then you have Chris Christie, and you mentioned Governor Ron DeSantis, who is now trailing, I believe, in either fourth or fifth in the state of New Hampshire. So Iowa, of course, you want to be able to put a feather in your hat and start the momentum and the ball rolling with the first state in having a win. But Iowa really isn't a good representation of the nation overall. If you look back in history, you had candidates like Mike Huckabee or Rick Santorum, who are more of a Bible Belt far right, extremely conservative, who won that state. And then, of course, they ended up losing and actually trailing pretty far behind when they ran. So I think Iowa, once again, it's fun to have a win, but I don't think that's going to be the end-all, be-all.
And for Ron DeSantis in particular, he seems to have put a big emphasis on Iowa, Amy. And I think even the governor, Kim Reynolds, has backed him, which was seen as quite a significant endorsement. And yet, if you go off the polls, he's significantly trailing Donald Trump still. So if he does lose badly in Iowa, what happens to DeSantis? Might he drop out in time for the New Hampshire primary? And would that then help Nikki Haley?
I don't see him dropping out if he doesn't do well in Iowa. I think he'll probably continue at least for the first four states and then maybe reassess. I think he's come too far to actually stop right after the first race. And like I just mentioned, Iowa really isn't a good representation of the nation's demographics overall. So once again, it would be nice to have a win, but I don't think that's going to be a detriment.
Yeah, and you mentioned
take Iowa.
Yeah, you mentioned Nikki Haley and how well she's doing in the New Hampshire polls. She's only a couple of points behind Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. What would need to happen for Nikki Haley to beat Trump to the nomination? Does she need to win New Hampshire? And then I think the next primary is her home state of South Carolina. Would she then need to build on it, win South Carolina, and start creating some momentum? Is that her route to the nomination?
You are 100% correct. And in fact, it's not impossible. It's a very steep hill to climb, but it's not impossible. And if she does do well and she wins New Hampshire and South Carolina, as you mentioned, then of course those would be two huge wins for her. And then if she were to win in Nevada, unfortunately, our Nevada Republican Party took it upon themselves to hold a caucus 2 days after our state mandated primary, which is a whole new conversation in itself. It's a mess. But they are only allowing delegates to be handed to those candidates who are participating in the caucus and not the primary. And so Nikki Haley is actually going to be on our primary ballot and not our caucus. But I do believe she's going to win our primary. And so that still is going to help her with momentum, as you had mentioned, tremendously.
Is there anything, Amy, that you think is realistically going to derail Donald Trump? I mean, you mentioned Nikki Haley's prospects in New Hampshire and South Carolina and Nevada, and we shall see whether she can build that momentum. But the narrative is that Donald Trump is cruising to the GOP nomination. Yeah. He's got all these legal problems. Do you think there's anything that can derail him?
No, which is insane for me to even say, because you would have thought after the first indictment that he would have stepped aside and said, okay, I'm going to clear the field because I love our country so much and I want what's best for its citizens. I'm going to step aside and go take care of my personal business. But no, he's only dug his heels in. He's done an excellent job at making sure that everyone believes that not only he's the victim, but that they too are in trouble if he isn't the one who's elected in the end. And so, he's done a really good job at stirring the pot, at making people fearful if he is not elected. And in his mind, he is the only answer, and his base actually believes that as well.
Amy, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Amy Tarkanian there, Republican strategist and former chair of the Nevada Republican Party.